All right. So Chair Davey, members of council, before we hear from the delegations, I'll just go over some of the feedback we've received already through other means. As has been noted through our other budget presentations, there's lots of different ways for people to connect, get information about the budget, and those are shown on the screen here. So we have this in-person meeting here tonight to carry on that tradition of being able to get live interaction with people as well as other methods. By far the most popular way that we've received feedback so far is through an online survey with Engage Kitchener. We've continued to grow our responses year over year, and this year there were 255 respondents to our budget survey compared to 171 last year. The survey itself was short, only 8 questions in total, but it also allowed opportunities for people to provide written input. All of that input was provided to council in an issue paper format late last week. It was also posted online, has been provided to council in printed form here tonight. So the remainder of my slides just summarize the information that's shown through that issue paper and that we received through online survey. The first question we asked respondents was about the service levels or the services that Kitchener provides. And more than half of respondents says the city does well in some areas but could improve in some other areas. And that's very similar to the proportion that we saw when we asked a similar question last year. The second place is a large number of people, 37%, saying that the city delivers good value for their tax dollars. The second question we asked was about the proposed tax rate levy increase of 2.3%, and a strong majority, or 72% of respondents, said that the increase was very or somewhat reasonable. That compares to 83% of respondents last year saying that the increase of 1.7% was very or somewhat reasonable. Next, we asked a question about the utility rate increase. And you can see that the responses are fairly evenly split between the 4 different options that were provided. And we see that just over half of respondents thinking that the increase was very or somewhat reasonable. And compared to last year when we asked the exact same question, 40% of respondents said that the same utility rate increase of 6.5% was very or somewhat reasonable. So we've seen an increase there. As you'll see later in the slide deck, investing in infrastructure was the top priority from our respondents, and so there may be some correlation between people saying we need to invest more in our infrastructure and understanding that that may require some rate increases above the rate of inflation in the utility space. Another question we asked people was about their attitudes towards tax rate increases and service levels. And council is aware of this question from previous surveys that we've done. And the response we got this year actually deviates somewhat from what we've typically seen. Through statistically valid community surveys in 2013 and 2018, as well as through last year's budget survey, the response we would normally get to this question is that around 60% of respondents saying that they prefer tax rate increases around the rate of inflation to maintain services, and that would be the yellow pie graph, with the remaining 40% being split between increasing rates above the rate of inflation to improve services or keeping the tax rate increase at zero and potentially cutting services. Through the 2019 budget survey, the responses for maintained services were much lower at 42%, and the increase seemed to go towards increasing above the rate of inflation to improve service levels. As was noted to council during previous budget presentations, there's been some new efforts taken with the 2019 budget to provide information in a more understandable way to the public. And we wanted to test that and understand if what the changes we made hit the mark. And what we've seen is largely yes. A strong majority, or 79% of respondents, said that the summary budget information was clear, it was easier to understand. So Kitchener will try to build on this knowledge and incorporate this in future financial reports and presentations as we move forward. One of the final questions on the survey was about the strategic priorities included in the budget, and we asked respondents, out of the ones that are identified, which one is most meaningful to you? As I've already alluded to, maintaining and investing in infrastructure, or the pink pie, was the largest response. And then you can see road safety and cycling and environmental sustainability each getting about a quarter of the vote. The final slide in my presentation is just a word cloud of the written comments that were provided. There's a whole lot of content that Council has in front of them as far as their responses, and this depicts the words most used by respondents. And the larger the word, the more often it came up. It's by no means a scientific measure, but it does provide some insight into the areas most mentioned by respondents. Mr. Chair, that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Haggie. Okay, so this evening we have 13 people registered to speak. If you are here to speak and you haven't registered ahead of time, you can make your way down to the page over here to your left, so you can have your 5 minutes of time. So again, this evening is about Council listening to your thoughts and concerns regarding the 2019 budget. So pretty much every other night is Council's opportunity to provide input. It seems this is your opportunity. So we're here to listen. The way this works is that each person in the order that I have here will come down and they will have 5 minutes to speak. There is a clock there that I will start. Please don't stop immediately when the clock runs out. Finish your thought, or if you have a little bit more to say, please go ahead and do that. And then if there are any clarifying questions from Council, then we will take those at that time. So please don't run away right afterwards either, just in case there are questions, okay? I think that covers it, so we will get right into it. First off, from Communitech, we have A.V. Peters.
Good evening. May I? Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of Council. My name is Abby Peters, and I'm part of the leadership team at Communitech. And here to do a couple of things this evening. First is to thank you for your partnership and your support of Communitech over the years with our work here in Waterloo Region, and to share with you some of the highlights of our activities and what we were able to accomplish with your support over the last year. So we, as I'm sure many of you know, we're in the business of helping the region's technology firms start, grow, and to be successful. It's been our job for the last 22 years when this fine group of folks decided to establish Communitech. These folks started out supporting a group of about 43 companies in the region. We now serve 1,400 companies here in the community, and our mission has stayed the same from the very beginning. It's our job to help technology firms start, grow, and to be successful, and we do that in three major ways. The first is we provide a place for tech companies to come together. We were able to found the Communitech Hub with support from the City of Kitchener back in 2010. As one of our founding partners, you helped us to build what's now Canada's premier innovation space and the place where technology firms get the help that they need. We recognize that Communitech is not in the business of helping companies alone. We partner with many other organizations in the ecosystem, whether those are companies, our municipal partners, our university and college partners. We work to provide the kind of environment that companies need, and we do that by providing programs to help them be successful. Typically, our programs are geared toward companies at whatever stage of growth they find themselves. So what did we accomplish last year? Our members were able to create a great number of jobs. They attracted significant amounts of investment capital to the region in the last year. In our facilities, we now support 183 tenant companies. Those are folks who are employing other members of our community locally. And we have had some work done for us around our economic impact by Deloitte Consulting, which estimates that for every dollar of investment that goes into Communitech, the ecosystem produces $22 of return. And specifically, the investments from this over the last year have been really helpful in our growth stage companies. So those are the companies that are enrolled in some of our accelerator programs, whether it's the Fierce Founder, women-led companies, Communitech Rev, which focuses on firms that are significant stage of sales revenue in their they helped us create more tools and better tools to support the growth of those companies. And over the years, the investments from partners like the city have enabled us to build out our corporate innovation program. And in fact, as you know, now the City of Kitchener is a big player in that corporate innovation program. What's been really interesting to us is the city has led the way in public sector innovation. Public sector entities like the city, very similar in some ways to other large enterprises looking for ways to be more innovative, to take advantage of technologies to serve their stakeholders. And we've been really encouraged by the intersection between the city's lab and also the Ontario Digital Service Lab, the Canadian Digital Service Lab, along with our 20-some other corporate partner. So this is the cast of characters now in our corporate innovation program. We have about 20 labs on site at the Communitech Hub. And one of the really interesting results of this corporate innovation program is now the intersection between large firms such as these you see on the slide and smaller firms that are growing in the community. So these large firms function as investors in those small firms, they function as customers, they function as partners to help those firms grow. So just a word or two about what's next for us. The Communitech strategy really is focused on supporting companies at all stages of growth, with a particular emphasis now on supporting those high growth, accelerating companies that are on their path to $100 million in revenue. The reason we focus on those $100 million revenue companies, or those that are on that path, these are companies like Vidyard or North. These are companies with the greatest capacity to attract investment to the region and to create jobs in the region. And we're supporting them through things like helping them attract talent, helping them to raise capital. And we are very conscious of the idea that we're not growing tech companies in isolation. Our firms, our clients, want to be connected to the broader community. They are looking for ways to make sure that they're engaged. One of the things that we launched this year was a partnership with the KW Community Foundation, whereby we hired a community impact coach. This is a business advisor for tech firms to help them build their corporate social responsibility programs. And the last thing that I'll mention is that our True North conference is coming up again in June. It is more than just a conference. It is an opportunity for us to bring more than 2,000 visitors to the region who will participate in the proceedings, but also will participate in a festival that takes place right up and down the core. So last year we were able to bring 2,200 attendees to the region to participate in the conference, to attend the festival and the concert at Carl's Air Square, to participate in multiple festival events over the course of the 2 days. Our goal is to hit 2,500 attendees this June, and we're well on the path to that. There'll be some new announcements about speakers and upcoming pieces in the weeks ahead. So I just wanted to say thank you for your support of Communitech and all of the work that we're able to do for technology companies. Is really, really important to the work that we're able to do for the community. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation and for all the work that Communitech does. There's just one person in the queue with a question. Councillor Singh.
Yes, very shortly, Mr. Chair. I mean, you mentioned your work with Deloitte and seeing exactly the capital return from the investment from Communitech to the community overall. Did you guys also assess the number of jobs that have been created in the region because of the work that Communitech does?
Mm-hmm, we do. We ask the companies that we serve to give us a sense of their estimated headcount at a couple of different points in the year. It gives us a way to estimate that. Over the course of, I think, the last 5 years in our strategy, and I'm going to look at my expert over my shoulder here in case I get this wrong. I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 13,000 new jobs over the course of the strategy. Now that goes back to 2009, I would guess, right?
That's still a phenomenal number, even over a five-year span. That's incredible and a huge asset to the community. May I make just a quick comment? I think I just don't want to lose sight of the phenomenal work that Communitech continues to do. And I think when it comes to economic development and job growth, municipalities, that's a very tall order. And I think we can't do it alone. It has to be done in partnership with organizations such as yourself. And through the numbers that you've presented through the presentation, which I hope that you can share with council, I would love to keep this presentation to share this info further with other residents as well. And the job creation numbers that you said, this is something that municipalities can't do on its own. And I think City of Kitchener has supported Communitech and hopes to continue support Communitech with the same confidence and ability that it's done. And I think we have created a great partnership by having presence there at the Tannery. And I would love to continue seeing this type of collaborative approach with a municipality and a non-for-profit organization such as Communitech that supports the local ecosystem of our technology sector and continues to transition our economy from manufacturing to technology.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Peters. There are no further questions. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Next, from Cycle Water Region, Emily Slofstra. Hello.
Hello. So good evening, Chair Davey and Council. Thank you for having this public input session this evening. So my name is Emily Slofstra. I'm the chair of Cycle WR, or Cycle Water the Region. So I'm here tonight in support of Kitchener's commitments to active transportation that we're seeing in this current budget. Cycle WR has spent the last year advocating for better cycling infrastructure, as well as the funding to make it happen, so that people of all ages and abilities can bike across the city. So from residential roads to bike lanes, we want to see people feel safe on their bicycles. We think the benefits of active transportation are clear for environmental, financial, health, and recreational reasons. And we're seeing broad support for it across the region. People want to be able to bike across the entire city. Hundreds of residents signed our pledge for better infrastructure. And in the audience today, I'd like to ask everyone who's here in support of cycling and active transportation to maybe wave, and it's clear from the bike helmets. And so I think a lot of people are really supportive of these projects that we're seeing. And I heard from a few people who weren't able to come tonight because they don't have a car, and it's hard to coax people who don't have a car to walk or bike in -20 sometimes. So we also had 6 of you around the Horseshoe sign on to a funding commitment. So we're happy to see that Kitchener staff members have gone above and beyond in working towards making Kitchener a safer city to cycle and walk through. So I'm glad to see that Kitchener is completing projects this year while also undertaking a reboot of the cycling master plan. And I trust that staff have selected the projects in 2019 with the intention that they will connect to the plans in the cycling master plan, and even more gaps will be filled in the years to come. So other delegates tonight will be talking about general benefits of separated protected infrastructure, which is what we're looking towards. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the actual projects that are in the budget. So starting with Water Street. So this is Water Street downtown, just a block or two away from City Hall. Currently it's not very useful for cyclists, even though it is sort of a painted bike lane. This wasn't a stage photo or anything. This was when I did a ride for with a candidate last year, and there was a truck parked in the bike lane. So this is basically every day on Water Street. So something that keeps the bike lane clear. I'd never let my 6-year-old bike here, so having some protection of some sort. So here's an example from Seattle of what we're kind of looking for as a cyclist. I would be much happier to let my whole family bike down something like this, where we know that there won't be any obstructions. People aren't going to pull over into this bike lane. This will allow people from neighborhoods like mine in Midtown or Old Berlin or downtown to cycle to Victoria Park and then connect to the Iron Horse and then be able to connect to the rest of the city. Next up, we have the Dutch Roundabout. So this here shows the Huron and Strasbourg beside a roundabout that I used to ride through in Amsterdam. They don't look all that different. Then there's many ways that you can build a Dutch roundabout, so we don't have the exact plans from staff yet, but I think we get a lot of emails and things on social media. We see people getting hit in bike lanes or in roundabouts a lot. So this is clearly an area that needs some attention in the region. So building some bike lanes, adding some protection and some separation for cyclists in roundabouts is essential. It's great to see the Kitchener is tackling this near a school, so I think that'll be really a very useful spot to put some implementation in. Another general aspect of driving in the Netherlands is that speeds tend to be lower, so this should tie in well to the study that Kitchener is doing and across the region about lowering speed limits to see if that helps as well. Next up, we have both Belmont and then Queen Street. So these are both slated to get some separated, protected bike lanes. And I didn't have to search Google Maps Street View to find these shots without very many cars in them. They were just the first ones I grabbed. So these streets are both built over capacity. They have under 10,000 to 15,000 vehicles a day. So they're prime candidates for a complete streets makeover. So something like this is what I can imagine working towards. For now, something just maybe some protection, make it a little bit better to walk and bike on would be great. And that image that I showed, so near on Queens Boulevard, so this is near Queensmount School. So getting some of that protected infrastructure near a school, I think, is essential. And then Belmont will also be important as a detour during the Iron Horse Trail construction, and long-term after that, but especially during construction. I know people who only use the trail, they don't ride on the road at all. So when the trail was closed last year, this meant doubling or tripling commute times by taking the bus or walking instead, because people who tend to use the trail maybe don't have a car. So getting those protected bike lanes in before construction begins will be essential. These routes will also be especially useful for commuter cyclists who would prefer not to dodge other trail users, like people walking their dogs, so people who are looking for a straight shot just to get to work. I think this will be a great route. So speaking of the Iron Horse Trail, this is my daughter last year who said, "This is a great trail, but it's not quite as nice as the Spurline Trail." So when I was pulling examples for other types of infrastructure, I had to look in other cities, but in terms of improving the Iron Horse Trail, I think we can just look to the Spurline. I think there's some, the improvements that are coming, the bridge replacement, lighting, widening, improving road crossings, those are all essential things that need to happen because this is a key route. And personally, the Spurline Trail is in my backyard. It's about 50 feet from my back door. So I can say wholeheartedly, yes in my backyard to anyone who lives along the Iron Horse Trail. And also, with the Spurline, we have an actual Iron Horse running through our backyard, shaking our house multiple times a night. So at least people along the Iron Horse don't have that. And then finally, just the last slide here is winter maintenance. So this is something where, as cyclists, we don't necessarily expect the whole city to be cleared, even though we'd like to have all the bike lanes cleared. But knowing that there are some priority routes would be really beneficial. Even today I had a note from someone about Margaret Ave wasn't cleared. And I said, this isn't actually on the bike clearing or the bike lane clearing routes, but it will be for next year, as long as the city votes to have that in the budget. So this will be really helpful to tell people okay, maybe don't take that road, but take this one. It's where it's a priority for bike clearing. So I know there's a few other transport-related items, so we don't have time to comment on all of them, but I'm happy to take questions about any of them or about cycling in general. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Mayor Verbanovich.
Great, thank you. And Emily, thanks for coming in with numerous other people tonight to talk about active transportation and for all the work that you've done throughout the fall at election time and on an ongoing basis with respect to Cycle WR. I guess my specific question has to do with Belmont Ave, and you touched on it a little bit. I know there's some question around, do we really need to sort of focus on Belmont when we've got the trail? Now, notwithstanding the fact that there'll be some construction going on this coming summer in terms of its improvements, assuming that they continue to be approved. But we've heard that, in fact, we do need it because it creates a longer route if people have to go around, and B, commuter cyclists prefer and are more likely to cycle as a commuter if they have access to a protected lane versus the trail. And you touched on it a bit. Wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how important that is.
Sure. So Belmont, it's sort of parallel to the Iron Horse Trail at some points, but not at others. I think at the widest point at Queen Street, it's about 1 kilometer apart. So it's not, if you lived over on the south end of Belmont, you wouldn't necessarily want to go up to the Iron Horse to commute on it, especially if you were traveling as a family. So having that route, I think, is very important. And as I already said, so for commuter cyclists, I think it'd be more useful. I know the Iron Horse, because it's been a bit narrower of a trail, it's more of, you get a lot more trail users, you get 4 people walking side by side because they're not used to having people using it as a commuter route as well. So having that separation, I think, will be really useful. I'm sure there's other reasons too. Okay.
And my second question, and you may not want to answer, you might want to leave it for a subsequent speaker, or this may just sort of clue in a subsequent speaker to touch on it. But wondering if you can just touch on the importance of protected lanes, and in fact, the fact that we are piloting some things, or propose to be piloting some things in the coming year, and how important that is as a next step towards the refresh of the cycling plan and where we're going in terms of the minimum grid.
Right. I think the protection is really key if we do want to move towards being a more active region, city, society, that kind of thing. People are seeing the benefits of being able to get out and just be active in their daily lives, rather than just going to the gym to exercise, but being able to bike places. But even though we've had things like painted bike lanes, we're not seeing a huge leap in people actually using them. They can measure it and you won't see a huge increase. They don't really feel any safer. People still get killed in them regularly. So unless you have that separation and that protection, you're not going to see an increase in the number of people using them. So putting those investments into that type of infrastructure isn't really beneficial to anyone.
Okay, thank you.
There are no more questions, Ms. Slofstra. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next, from Reap Green Solutions, Mary Jane Patterson.
Good evening, councillors, Chair Davey, and city staff and visitors. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I'm here speaking in support of two of the priority investments in this budget this year, and also lending my support to the cycling infrastructure too. As a cyclist, that's great to see. So the two items that I want to speak to are the Corporate Sustainability Program and the Urban Forest Strategy. Last year, I was so pleased to see the city hire a corporate sustainability officer. I think it says a great deal about the city's commitment to sustainability. And when I look at the priorities identified in the issue paper this year, I think it looks like now she needs the tools and the way to fulfill her mandate, and that's what is in the budget. So I strongly support this. I think there's some really important pieces in this budget request. Collecting data, monitoring, and reporting, all of that is really important for accountability. Engaging the community in greening activities, like managing rain on private property. And empowering frontline staff. Those are all excellent points to see. In particular, I think the revolving fund is a wise investment for the city, paying itself back through efficiencies gained and then using those funds for more savings. What I see is city departments working together on that also as capital investments are made, and that seems great to see too. So I urge the city to approve the budget priority called Enhancing the City's Environmental Sustainability. And then the Urban Forest Strategy, that's something that I see as a really important part of the city's commitment to sustainability and climate action. And I'm wearing my City of Kitchener tree t-shirt today because I love its message. Trees are essential to our community for all that they contribute to cooling down the cities, soaking up stormwater, giving us air to breathe, and the beauty and peace and well-being that they bring. At REAP, we've been impressed with the thoughtful way that city staff have put together the urban forest strategy, and I've heard that from other municipalities too who've been observing Kitchener's process. REAP staff have been working with the city for over a year now on one part of the strategy on a partnership to explore the best ways to support tree planting on private property, because so much of our urban canopy is on private property. The pilot that's proposed is for a subsidized tree planting program with education and workshops on tree care, meeting with property owners to choose the right tree for the location, and getting their commitment to care for that tree after that. These steps respond to what forestry staff heard from residents during their community engagement process. We see that people are eager to plant trees in their yards and contribute to the urban canopy, and they need support to do it well and to help those trees thrive after that. So I want to say kudos to the city on its urban forest strategy and urge you to approve implementing the first stage. In conclusion, I've never forgotten that FCM report that said that municipalities are directly or indirectly responsible for, I think it was about 43% of Canada's emissions. I am so proud of the work as a citizen and representing REAP, of the work that the City of Kitchener and the region of Waterloo are doing as other levels of government come and go on the issue of climate change. I think we are the steadying force, and you, councillors, are leading the way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
I just want to say thank you very much for the work that REAP Green Solutions does to partner with the city. We wouldn't be able to achieve what we do without partnerships like the one we have with your organization. Just a question. When you look at the fund for the revolving fund for green initiatives, do you see an opportunity to potentially have outward-facing as well as inward-facing initiatives? So to have the grants available to community members to then be able to pay back over time?
That's a really neat idea. If I were on city staff with that fund, I'd want that to be a separate fund.
Yes, a separate fund.
But I think it's a really cool idea to explore with community projects.
Well, maybe for a future budget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. Thanks for your thoughtful presentation. Appreciate it. Next, from the Waterloo Global Science Initiative, Haley Rutherford and Kate Pierce. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Davey and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Kate Pierce, and this is my colleague Haley Rutherford, and we represent the Waterloo Global Science Initiative, a nonprofit based here in Waterloo Region that aims to catalyze collective action on complex problems. We are here to support draft budget measures related to environmental sustainability. At WGSI, our current work, Generation SDG, focuses on Canada's ability to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, also called the Global Goals or the SDGs. These 17 goals seek to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by promoting safe, inclusive, equitable, and sustainable societies. Our work with the SDGs has taught us that communities are the best qualified to speak on their own unique needs and design solutions according to local conditions. The SDGs provide a common language and system of measurement for transforming our cities and neighborhoods into places where we can all live, work, and prosper. We are thrilled to see that throughout this draft budget, the City of Kitchener is showing leadership and demonstrating the interconnected and indivisible nature of the global goals. Funding a sustainability program to meet our greenhouse gas commitments addresses one of the truly catalytic goals, SDG 13 on climate action. If we cannot live within our planetary boundaries, we will not be able to provide a sound social foundation, nor will we be able to create a robust economy. Taking decisive action on SDG 13 unlocks our potential to achieve targets within each and every other goal.
Budget measures within the environmental sustainability focus area of this draft budget, including energy retrofits and smarter fleet investments, provide clear pathways to achieving those GHG emission reductions, and directly addresses targets within SDG 7, affordable and clean energy for all, and SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. The urban forest strategy, specifically clearing the tree planting backlog and inspection program, ensure that we are meeting targets within SDG 15, life on land, and providing crucial carbon sequestration while creating vibrant green neighborhoods. Additionally, the road safety and cycling focus area in this draft budget further supports GHG reductions. According to Climate Action Waterloo Region, nearly half of the region's GHG emissions come from the transportation sector, most of that from personal vehicle use. By providing residents with convenient, connected, and protected active transportation options, that will have a significant impact on our GHG emissions as well as on SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. We look to the City of Kitchener to continue leading our community in this work and to support the approval of the environmental sustainability measures in this 2019 draft budget. We would also like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work, talent, and dedication among city staff who we know will work diligently to implement these programs. The need to champion an optimistic, inclusive, and sustainable vision of our future has never been greater. We look forward to seeing the priorities set out in this budget come to life in our community. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you very kindly for your presentation. I'm not seeing anyone in the queue. So again, thank you kindly. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, next from Student Transportation Services of Waterloo Region, Leslie Maxwell.
start.
Oh, I'll restart that for
Wait for
you.
that clock. I get an extra minute.
Go on ahead now.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of the schools that I represent. And thank you, City of Kitchener, for helping to support the work that I do and the work that my team does at Student Transportation Services. It's a powerful experience for a child to walk or bike on their own to school. Knowing they can trust the strength of their own body, call on the social network surrounding them, and rely on the infrastructure under their feet is all part of that power. The separated bike lanes that are being considered in this budget this year will no doubt make our tiniest commuters feel that they are a valuable part of our transportation network and that they have not been overlooked. With this proposed project, this single project, we can make the commute better for students at 4 of our elementary schools whose combined enrollment is 1,858 students. I'd like to demonstrate with a slide up here one particular corner. It's meant to simulate the corner at Belmont and Gage, where we get a lot of complaints from students and their parents about the close calls that happen there. If we add a bike lane here with the a left-hand turning lane, especially heading north, and reduce the lanes to 1 in each direction, that configuration will lend the option. Well, first of all, the bike lanes all along Queen and Belmont will lend the option for our students to use a main corridor and a more direct path to their schools. And other destinations that they go to. At this corner in particular, it will also allow for separation of, well, and all along actually as well. It allows for separation of the traffic in such a way that it is more predictable for students and for any pedestrian. With that left-hand turning lane, we'd know that those cars are turning left, and we wouldn't expect a car coming up behind it to swerve so often into the other lane. We would also be given a choice with this particular bike lane along Belmont Ave as to whether we want to use the separated trail, or sorry, the off-road trail or the on-road bike lane. And it would the bike lanes also provide a trusted buffer between not only cyclists and the cars, but also any pedestrians and the cars on these busy streets. Those sidewalks are a little bit troubling for our students. Here at this corner, it would also shorten the crossing distance for our students so that they would have an easier time making it across the street in the time provided. And finally, you can see there's a cyclist in that corner. If your eyes are better than mine, you can see that that's a cyclist who is looking to the cars and the traffic at that corner. And the sight lines are broken, especially if you see the yellow car there. The cyclist can't see where that car is or how fast it's traveling, and students would have a hard time discerning that gap anyways, and with fewer cars coming from fewer directions, it's much easier for them. The bike lane project would also, and the shortening of this width would also allow cars a better visibility or better sight lines to any pedestrians. In all factions, I guess, this project would actually help our students make it across this crossing much more safely. I'd like to point out that we all look at Copenhagen as kind of a beacon for cycling infrastructure and actually pedestrian infrastructure. When they began their shift towards becoming pedestrian-friendly city back in the 60s, it started with a single pedestrian-only street. Key to building on this was linking that original street to pedestrian priority streets in order to lend a real network of choice to pedestrians. Other steps taken in Copenhagen probably sound familiar to you. They gradually reduced parking so there were fewer cars in the city. They honored the human scale by creating beautiful spaces and placemaking infrastructure to make walking a pleasant experience. They populated the downtown core. They encouraged student commuters, which you do through my office, recognizing that student pedestrians and cyclists do not add to traffic congestion, and on the contrary, their active presence day and night animates the city. Did you know that the school commute is responsible for an estimated 25% of the morning commute traffic? But they also promoted cycling as a major mode of transportation by building safe and protected cycling infrastructure along with bike crossings. The City of Kitchener has, of course, taken many similar steps towards becoming pedestrian forward. But our cycling and walking infrastructure and maintenance is not quite at a place yet to encourage the student commute. We know this, we bear witness to it when we see the drastic numbers of drivers congesting and crowding our school zones and creating an unsafe environment for our students. I get a little bit emotional about that and a little passionate about that, as you know. My team has been working persistently to shift this culture. I hope you'll side with us and choose to support this separated bike lane project to give us a tangible boost. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis has questions.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thanks, Ms. Maxwell, for coming in and always doing the great work that you do. I'm curious, what would be your feelings on the trails that are surrounding around schools in particular? In your experience, are you finding them maintained at all?
Some, and where we have good winter maintenance, we see a lot of uptake of use of those trails. We get some complaints about some of them not being done fast enough, but we work very diligently through our office to remind people that we are Canadian and we can walk over snow sometimes, and to have patience with the snow clearance schedules. But we really do support having greater clearance from start to finish so that our commuters can really rely on those pathways to be cleared. It does get a little frustrating on city streets sometimes, and when trails can be half maintained, especially when there's co-ownership.
Well, that was my next question. How are your discussions with the school board in the past dealing with trails that are towards school and all season maintenance?
We work on a school-by-school basis with that, and so we're making some good headway with our principalship to encourage their snow contracts to include the pathways. So they understand that if we're going to use access points that include a pathway, we need to keep those cleared for strollers and other wheeled objects, so that all families can make it all the way to the front door.
Okay, that's good too. And my last question is, in the future, would you like to see the city take a more active role towards maintaining these roads? These trails?
The trails, yes, and sidewalks as well. Okay. to give that a boost, because of the reliability of a cleared pathway, we really can't expect any pedestrian to set out on foot from their front door if they don't know that the pathway will be cleared all the way. And we have lots of families with 3 or 4 kids in strollers, tucked in, packed in, and we've even had parents who make it halfway to school on a snowy day and have to bail and turn back around and go home and get the car, which on those days we have more cars anyways, so it just convolutes the whole commute and makes it more difficult for those on foot.
I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I just have one question. Earlier in your presentation, you referenced, I believe, the cycling infrastructure that's proposed impacting 1,858 students. Is that that's current within our budget now?
Is that, sorry?
That's just the cycling initiatives that are in our current 2019 budget that's impacting those students?
That's just the Queen's Street and Belmont Street projects.
That's an excellent bit of perspective. Thank you. There are no further questions.
And just to add to that, there's about 1,000 of them who exist or who actually are in walk zones within that amount or that enrollment. But these bike lanes are in these kids' neighborhoods, so they're not just going to school. They'll be using them to get other places as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next from the Tri-Cities Transport Action Group, I think we're seeing a bit of a theme here, Mike Bose.
How high can I get these things here? Good evening, Chair Davey, Mayor Verbanovic, members of council. I'm presenting tonight on behalf of the Tri-Cities Transport Action Group. TriTag advocates for better walking, wheeling, cycling. It's all right. cycling and transit throughout Waterloo Region, and we're pleased to be able to comment on this year's budget. In particular, we're encouraged by the emphasis the proposed budget places on protected bike lane pilots. We've seen the transformative impact such pilots have had in other Canadian cities. Calgary and Edmonton, despite being oiled towns with very cold winters, much like today, have seen cycling blossom with their rapidly implemented downtown grids. In Hamilton, the Cannon Street cycle track, together with Dockless Bike Share, saw winter cycling increase by a factor of 5. And in Toronto, the Richmond and Adelaide cycle tracks have shown a 10-fold increase in bike trips along those streets. In addition, the region plans to implement a protected bike network pilot in Waterloo later this year. Plans that no doubt contributed to Waterloo's Gold Bicycle Friendly Community Award from Share the Road this spring. Protected bike lanes work because they're for everyone, not just the most enthusiastic or courageous. We mark conventional painted bike lanes on busy streets with black diamonds. In skiing, black diamonds mark the slopes that are steep and difficult. You need a little extra courage and skill to navigate them. Protected lanes with physical separators, like bollards or curbs, are more like the green circle ski runs. They're accessible and easy for everyone to enjoy, no matter how seasoned or audacious. Studies of streets with protected bike lanes have found reductions in the number of collisions, not just for people biking, but for people walking and driving too. It's simply safer when everyone has a place of their own on the street. So why give these streets the green circle treatment? Why Queens Boulevard, Belmont Avenue, Water Street, a Dutch roundabout, and the Iron Horse Trail as a focal point for our investments this year? Quite simply, these projects help strengthen and extend a network. Since the Cycling Master Plan was adopted in 2012, Kitchener's cycling infrastructure efforts have felt somewhat scattershot. We've built lots of little bits of pieces here and there, but very little that connects up. A person who's nervous about cycling isn't going to be comforted by the bike lane at the beginning and end of their trip if they must face a dangerous road in the middle. The Iron Horse and Spurline trails form great backbones to our active transportation network, but we need to extend that network's reach into more neighborhoods. What we love about the proposed projects is that they, in just 1 year, connect 3 different city wards and really rub up against a 4th. With this kind of strategic focus, I believe by the end of this term of council, we could have a protected cycling and trail network where you could travel from any one ward to another without having to encounter a dangerous gap. By targeting streets with excess road space, we're also growing that network by 5 kilometers at less than half the cost than if we were having to lay down new asphalt to make space. And if the city's open data is any indication, the daily traffic volumes on Belmont and Queens Boulevard are well within the range where reimagining them as complete streets just makes good sense. At TriTag, we've also simulated potential demand to see where people would be likely to go given available infrastructure. We based our system on trips less than 5 kilometers in length from the 2016 Transportation for Tomorrow survey, and a simple cycling route preference model that assumes people are willing to go a little bit out of their way if a less direct route is safer. As you can see by the map, we would expect the streets and trails of focus in this year's budget to rank among the most popular in the city. Not only that, but we can see how the protected lanes unlock emerging demand in areas like the Lakeside and Concordia Park trails, which could provide, in the future, connection to the network in wards south of Highway 7 and 8. We're grateful for the careful thought and planning staff have put into the budget for cycling this year. These are the right projects for the right places at the right time. We ask that you wholeheartedly approve the cycling and trails projects in this year's draft budget, and that we incorporate this strategic, smart approach into future budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rubenovich.
Thanks. And thanks for coming in, Mike, and thank you for all the work that you and TriTag and the others are doing on this file. There's some who would argue that, it's certainly a laudable goal and we should move towards protected bike lanes and so on, but would say that, this trial this year of advancing some small sections really should wait, and we should, wait until the new cycling master plan is done. I would take it that your group would not agree with that, and so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why you think it's important to move forward now, and how this really would just feed into the next steps of the cycling master plan.
Well, what I have learned from staff, and I certainly at TriTag, we have encouraged pilot projects of various kinds in the past, is that by trying new things and studying them and learning from them, we can actually improve and have better approaches as we develop our plans going forward. What's the phrase? The first casualty of war is the battle plan. We have a cycling master plan from 2012, but when that hits the each project, we find ourselves in a bit of a battle and caught up in trying to figure out is this actually the right bike lane project, or is this the right trail project that the city needs to pursue. I think by piloting these sorts of things, we can very rapidly, especially with the road context that we have now, with this amazing opportunity of all this available road space, is be able to quickly demonstrate the value of this kind of infrastructure that we don't have very much of in the city at the moment. And that'll give us the information we need. And we also know, looking at cities from across Canada and around the world, that this kind of infrastructure works, that these kind of pilots give us good data, give us good information, and actually build community buy-in for this kind of infrastructure. So we're very excited to see it go forward.
Thank you. There are no further questions, Mr. Bose. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have former Councillor Jean Helbrom.
Thank you, Chair Davey and members of council. And I'm not here to talk about heritage tonight. Well, January the 8th, Tuesday, I was reading in the local record, Councillors Defend Climate Investments. And a question, is there wisdom in setting up a fund to pay for projects to reduce carbon footprint, to address climate change? Now, I have to step back and say that at times, for many of us, it's really hard to understand these terms, carbon footprint, climate change. What is it? Well, I like to look at observations. I like to look at them in concrete terms. What do we observe about the weather? Rainstorms in spring, summer, and fall. Flash flooding occurs more frequently and more violently. And I'll give you an example of a couple of years ago with the rainstorm that was very great, and the water flew into Schneider Creek from the storm sewers, I guess, and it was coming down and it hit the area of Upper Doon, Doon Village Road, and what do you know, the banks couldn't hold the water. The banks of Schneider Creek could no longer hold that water, and the water went over the road and over the railings of the bridge on Schneider Creek. And a youngster was thinking, oh, I can just ride through that. And luckily, there was a fireman or a police officer that rescued him. But you can see this happening, and I'm sure you've heard of the flooding in streets and neighborhoods. You've heard it in the plazas in Fairview Mall and Fairway Road area. They just can't manage the water because it comes down so fast, so quickly, so much. Then I have another observation. On a hot day, and you know that our summers are getting hotter, that when you go to the shopping mall or the plazas, the acres of pavement, they give off this heat. We've got all these heat islands. Now, Councillor Chapman in the same article said, is there not more to be done in development projects? And I would like to say I'm really thankful that you have said, great idea to add more trees. I feel residents are doing a lot with trees and their properties. What I don't see are all these plazas and malls that have acres and acres of pavement, hard surfaces, the asphalt. And I would like to see more encouragement that trees and are demanded on these large parking lots. It really does cool the earth. Now, there's another area of concern, and it has to do with this runoff and the stormwater. And I hope I can do this right. All right? So what you have before here, and it's called pervious concrete. But I realized that in 2015, the City of Kitchener managed to get a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for permeable pavers. That was a demonstration plot out at the Huron Natural Area, correct? And you had a lot of publicity on that. Well, with the region, we have started and I shouldn't say we, but this, I have to say it started in 2015, 2016. It's called pervious concrete. And what is so good about this is that our soil is generally well suited for the drainage. The water is absorbed where it falls. It doesn't, on hot days, it doesn't pick up the pollutants as it runs to the storm sewers. And it's naturally filtered before it hits the water table. Pervious concrete doesn't suffer cracking, and probably in the long run it saves money. And here you can see the church in the Heritage Village at Doon. And also you realize that it's up on top of the hill, and there's a road, a little road beside the church, and in front of it. And for years, every year there would be a flood and it had to come down and it had to be redone. Now 5 years from snow plowing and running and with the water running, it's just fine and it stays in place. So I give that to you. Now, the other thing that I'd like to draw your attention to, and this was in Municipal World in October 2006, and it's about the Credit River Water Management Strategy. I don't know if you have that picture or not. Everyone has it.
We do. We were provided with one copy.
I'm going to finish right up here. I just know that the Credit River in that area, it feeds into Lake Ontario in the Mississauga area, and they want to increase development but keep their water supply safe. And so they've implemented the strategy, and they've looked at, and if you look at this, they've looked at their way of their development regulations of how you have for runoff and so on. And so the top is business as usual, and the other bottom one is more environmentally friendly. You reduce the impervious cover, you introduce swales, you have rain barrels, retrofit the sites, even in plazas and malls. And there's a very great study that's now been reported on the web about it. It just seems to me that pervious concrete, that's another part of it. And it just seems to me that we should be going in that direction, at least investigating. So, funding, is it wisdom to do it? Consider, I'd like to have the reduction of the heat islands and more planning policies for development with regard to how things look. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haldeman, for your presentation. I actually recall seeing, the first time I saw the concrete that allows that water through was on a YouTube video. It almost looked fake because they were spraying a hose on it and the water wasn't going anywhere, it was going straight through. So I'm confident the moment that technology comes down a little bit in price and becomes comparable, that's something that we'll be looking at, I think, much more seriously. I don't see anyone queued up with questions, so thanks again for your presentation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Next, from the Kitchener Easy Riders Bicycle Club, Roger Suffling. That would almost sound like a gang if you didn't have bicycle in there, I think.
Oh, we are. Thank you, Chair Daly and Council, for the opportunity to address you. I'm the lead of the Bike Advocacy Committee at Kitchener Easy Riders Bicycle Club. And a number of our members are here. Our club has a cap membership of around 350 and a waiting list that stretches back about 2 years. Cycling is popular in the city. And we cycle for fun, for fitness, and as part of an environmental ethic. Cycling is popular among seniors in the city, but we are members of a much wider community, a very wide community. I've heard estimates that there are 10,000 cyclists in the city, and I don't know where that comes from, but I keep hearing it. We are commuters, we are dirt bikers, we are the economically marginalized people who have to use a bike. We have no other option. We are kids on sidewalks and road warriors. We are shoppers and we are commuters. We are old and young, rich and poor, recent immigrants and established citizens. We are a wide, large group. So what you see here is just the tip of the iceberg. We cyclists run into difficulties in the city, moving around. Try reaching Fairway shopping area. It's a nightmare. Try getting to the boardwalk without going on a busy road. It's very difficult. Try getting to the Ord, the Queen Street Main Library, the market, shopping on Victoria Avenue. Horrible. Been there. We want our suburbs, our commerce and our downtown to be actively linked. And we share that as a community, whether we're kids or seniors or rich or poor and so on. We all have that imperative. Members of Easy Riders are pleased to see cycling and active transport generally being recognised as a priority in the budget. We find this exciting. We support the initiatives that have been earmarked this year, specifically protected lanes and complete streets. Now, if you look at the academic studies and the practical studies out there, study after study after study shows you that your cycling rates will go up as soon as you have protected lanes for bikes. The primary thing that inhibits people is fear, and understandably, because most cyclists have experienced it in abundance. The trial of the Dutch roundabout is a great idea. There is no more powerful way of proving or disproving an idea than to try it out. Try things out, do them on a small scale, and build them up as you see success. Do go for this one. The Iron Horse Trail improvements. We use the Iron Horse Trail a lot, along with hundreds of thousands of other, trips back and forth. And not just us, but the kiddie strollers and runners and the people in wheelchairs and the whole bit. The key thing with the Iron Horse Trail is the road crossings. Get those right. Pay for those. It's an investment. We are much, much more skeptical about doing a lot of landscaping along the trail, scalping it clean, mowing it and so on, which represents an ongoing cost. Winter bike lane maintenance is very important to the commuter community. You'll see your rates of cycling go up once the roads are safer and they're cleared. Do look at the resident traffic calming aspects. That's a good one. And the Belmont Avenue improvements, well, we've heard the arguments in favour of those, and they're powerful. So such amenities as these attract job seekers to the region. We know this, again, from study after study. If you look at why people move to a region, whether it's Seattle or California or Waterloo, a lot of it relates to lifestyle and quality of life. And I've been there as a job seeker. You check things out like bikeways and parks and so on. You want to be sure that they're there for your kids and for yourself. And lastly, I would remind you that in going for these opportunities, you are actually freeing up space on the roads for the four-wheel drivers, and you're freeing up parking spaces as people take to biking. Biking aids health and fighting human-caused climate change. It's very important in an arena like this not to take up a silo form of thinking. Think about the big picture, because people will thank you for it in 20, 50 and 100 years' time when we're gone, but our kids and our grandchildren are here. Please consider these initiatives seriously and think of them in terms of their broad benefit to our community. Our club supports them wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Suffling. There does not appear to be any questions. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Josh Gibbons. And helper.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Josh Gibbons, and this is my son Caleb. And we live in Forest Hill within Ward 8. So we've come to speak about the proposed protected bike lanes along Queen Street. All right. So I biked along the proposed bike route to my office located near the intersection of Queen and Highland. Pretty much in all weather conditions. It includes approximately 1.1 kilometers of the section proposed for upgrade. There's really no other reasonable trail or road alternative from where we live in Forest Hill. So I've biked this route for many years, and I'm a pretty confident bike rider riding alongside traffic. And also, our family uses my bike as our alternate vehicle, and we only have one. So a couple comments of riding on this on Queen Street. So there's no bike lane of that section on my commute. I simply stay next to the curb and get a little tight in the winter, but if you know what you're doing, it's not too bad. I've seen many people riding their bike along the sidewalk on that section of Queen. Not ideal, but people don't really feel safe, so that's what they do. Let's see here. Also, there's an occasional car parked on the side of Queen, which pushes me further into the middle of the road. So I'm comfortable with that, so I simply just move into the middle lane, block the cars behind me, and nobody tries to pass me, so I'm good. But it's, for less confident bike riders, it's pretty uncomfortable trying to get to the middle of the road and navigate that. Also, my only significant incident with a car was riding on Queen, so it's outside of that, but it was up on Queen near Cortland, riding an unprotected bike lane. A driver turned right and cut me off. I just had enough time to slow down to lightly make impact. A couple summary notes. I wouldn't let my son Caleb ride on Queen in this section right here. It's far too busy. And when we ride to downtown Kitchener right now, he bikes on the sidewalk, I bike on the road. I get this not really intent of the sidewalks, but there's really no other way of connecting Forest Hill down to the downtown Kitchener area. Also, in a couple years, he's going to be attending Queensmount. And really the only way of connecting, he's got to get down Queen Street from Forest Hill and to get to Queensmount. Ideally, he would bike to school, but in its current configuration, he really will just be dropped off or walk to school, one or the other. So really, with Queen in its current state, I'll probably continue to bike on it, but I'm pretty certain the percentage of people who bike along Queen won't change. It's far too busy of the road for the majority of people who don't feel as confident as biking as myself. I think really, like as lots of people have spoken here, unless people feel safer, they're not really going to change their habits in regards to biking. In addition, kids such as Caleb, they'll continue to ride their bikes on sidewalks, or they're just going to get dropped off from school and parents because Queen's too unapproachable in that area. All right. So anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kylie. There are no questions, but thank you, Caleb. Thanks, guys, for coming in and putting sort of a personal touch on some of the work that we're doing. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Melissa Bowman. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and Councillors. I'm Melissa Bowman, and tonight I'm speaking in favor of a number of proposed items in the 2019 budget, many of which I believe will contribute to a more walkable and accessible city. I'm sure you're familiar with Vision Zero guidelines and principles, with the overarching one being, humans make errors, so we must design streets to mitigate those errors. I was thinking of how many of the Vision Zero principles are evident in my everyday life, even in my work as a preschool teacher. My center that I work at has a really long, empty, and straight hallway. And I think you can likely guess how each of those preschoolers interact with that hallway when they come across it. They run, every single one of them. And that long, empty hallway cues their brain that this is a space to go fast. Now, we've put up some picture signs, and we remind children to slow down. And it's true, some of them do, at least temporarily. But many don't. Now, contrast that with the experience once we enter the classroom. A space that has no long, empty runways, but it is rather a more complex system that requires slower navigation. Without needing any visual or verbal reminders, every child moves differently in that space, slower, more deliberately. Our brains pick up environmental cues on how to behave. This not only applies to preschoolers at childcare, of course, but to road users as well. If drivers face clear, wide, straight open roads, we drive fast. And streets that are filled with fast drivers are not welcoming, walkable, bikeable streets. They are not streets that are made for all residents. I'm thrilled to see a number of initiatives in the 2019 budget that aim to make streets friendlier for all residents. Initiatives such as protected bike lanes, continued Iron Horse Trail improvements, winter maintenance for bike lanes, traffic calming initiatives, and the urban tree strategy. I'm truly excited about this direction, and I'm here today to express my support for it. I'd also request that we revisit last year's sidewalk snow clearing pilot proposal. Now, I know some people see these budget items as nice to haves, and in an effort to keep taxes low, they tend to be the first things cut. But these are not the wishes of just a few people or only of special interest groups. Few, if any of us, only ever travel using one mode. Even those who rely on driving as their main mode of transportation are still a pedestrian to and from their vehicle and their destination. And if you're tempted to cut any of these particular items, I encourage you to look at the city's own research that states, the three top issues identified by residents are maintaining and investing in infrastructure, followed by road safety and cycling, and environmental sustainability. These three issues are all addressed through the cycling and walking projects identified in the budget. A quote from an article on the most recent Compass Kitchener findings states, residents still regard public transit as the top issue facing the city, and a majority want to see more walkable neighborhoods established. I understand that we must have reasonable taxes, but please remember, again from Compass Kitchener's research on this, 42% of respondents believe that it's desirable to keep taxes on par with the inflation rate, while 36% are willing to see an increase greater than that if it means improved services. Many citizens are willing to forego lower taxes if it means increased services that improve the livability of their city. The draft budget contains several such measures that deserve Council's support and funding in the final budget. I'm here to voice my support on these initiatives that will help make our city more walkable and accessible to all residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. There doesn't appear to be anyone with questions, but thank you for coming in. Appreciate the feedback. Okay, next, Daniel Brotherston. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and Councillors. I'm Daniel Brotherston. I'm a member of the Cycling and Trails Committee, but I do not speak to you in that role tonight. I am not a member of TriTag, nor of Cycle WR, nor was I mobilized by these groups to come here. In fact, I had not even read articles by these groups when I decided to come speak. I come here as a regular citizen of Kitchener who sees the enormous long-term benefits to our city, to our social fabric, to our health and environment that improved cycling infrastructure can bring. I also come here as a resident of the city who gets around all year by bicycle, who selfishly wishes that our city streets were safer for me when I do so. I'm here to ask you to support the proposed cycling funding included in this year's budget and support the associated cycle infrastructure projects. I believe they represent a good use of our city's resources and are in line with reasonable funding amounts and represent an alignment between the city's stated goals and our budget. I'm sure you've heard the benefits of cycling infrastructure repeated here many times, even tonight, and I know many of you support this already. You know that it allows people to cycle who would otherwise be uncomfortable mixing with traffic or mixing with cars. You already know this increases the social equity in our community by providing better transportation options for those who would find owning a car financially burdensome. You already know the benefits cycling can provide to our mental and physical health, to our environment, and to the resilience of our transportation system in the face of a changing climate. The Dutch Roundabout is an excellent opportunity to show how roundabouts can be made safer and more inclusive by taking design cues from a country which has proven cycling can work. This is an ideal location because it connects employment to housing, to schools, to shopping. Here, the city can prove out an idea to demonstrate that to the entire region its benefits. The city can be a leader here. The Iron Horse Trail improvements are incredibly popular. The trail is well loved in the community, and the upgrades planned will make it more accessible, safer, and useful to all of us. This one is a no-brainer in my opinion. The protected bike lanes proposed on Queens Boulevard and Belmont Ave are a great opportunity to repurpose, for a very low cost, the 1960s era car-first overbuilt road space into a safer street for commuters and residents alike. The Belmont work can provide an important bypass for the Iron Horse Trail during its construction. Staff can probably give you numbers as to how many people this closure will be impacting. But these projects do much more than that. Because these links are connected, they form the beginning of a network that would allow people to choose to bike instead of being forced to drive. Belmont is key to this. The Iron Horse Trail does not intersect Queens Boulevard. Without completing Belmont, the city would simply be building yet another disconnected component. Finally, because the project is done as a pilot using existing road space, it is cost-effective. We get a large, useful, connected piece of cycling infrastructure for far less than we would pay to widen existing roads. And thus, we get to prove out the concept before making big investments. Moreover, on these roads, we will turn wasteful overbuilt road space which separates communities into a slower, safer street, which actually works to connect the communities these roads run through. Cost-wise, the proposed amount in the budget is a reasonable figure to spend on cycling, in my opinion. It works out to around $10 a resident, far less than what a Dutch city spends, but that's a given here. Compared with municipalities in Canada, it's perfectly in line. It's also in line with the Cycle WR pledge amount, and this is done all without raising taxes above inflation. It's a crazy good deal. In light of all of these benefits and the completely reasonable and affordable funding request, I urge you to support the cycling funding in the budget, or the proposed cycling funding in the budget, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you kindly for your presentation. I do appreciate you pointing out, just in case there's any confusion, that the cycling items are included in the budget and fully funded within that rate of inflation. But there are no questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Sorry, under the rate of inflation, that's right. Next, and I might be guessing the pronunciation, Clayton Claver from the Lakeside Park Working Group.
Hello, my name's Clayton Claver. Since I retired from teaching a few years ago, I've become a member of the Lakeside Park Working Group. And because of your generosity, and thank you for enabling me to speak here this night about the budget, we won a placemaking grant that enabled Lakeside Park to have a resident-led recycling program, one of the few parks in all of Ontario and that's because of the fact that grants are available. So I'm here in support of funding for the urban forest strategy, and I'd like to see an improvement in the homeowner's contribution in reducing climate change. So the picture in front of you is one of the 3 fledgling hawks that were birthed in Old Forest Hill, just a few blocks away from St. Mary's Hospital. So because of the incentives and because of the urban forest that we have this amazing high-level predator that was able to give birth to not just one, but three hawks that gradually learned how to fly. That particular hawk dropped that bird that it had managed to hunt down, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to get it. But over the course of many months last summer, we were able to watch all 3 of them thrive. This is a picture of the same tree. Just to the right is the branch that the hawk was on. And I didn't realize till just a few weeks ago that here in Kitchener, there are no rules or bylaws regarding trees and their cutting down on private property. My understanding of it is that owners can do anything they want to on the trees on their property. And time again, homeowners are moving into Old Forest Hill and making it into suburbia and cutting down all the trees. And the neighbor beside me asked the neighbor behind me if he could cut down all those branches because he wanted more sunlight on the back of his property, having moved into Old Forest Hill. So when I was teaching elementary science, I sometimes ask my students about animals and what's the most important thing for an animal to live. Would anyone be able to answer that question? What's the most important thing right now for you to be able to live? Well, how long can you hold your breath? So we need clean air. That's the 3rd most important thing. First most is movement. Second most is warmth. Third is clean air. 4th is water. You can live about 3 days without water and a couple months without food. So investing in infrastructure like rail trails and bike lanes that get people moving, preventing our groundwater from being contaminated, particularly by salt, allows future generations of Kitchenerites to benefit. So I'm asking Council here tonight to consider a 2-pronged approach. consider it a carrot and a stick. Currently, if residents get rain barrels, they can apply for a stormwater reduction fee. Get maybe $2, $4, depends on the number of rain barrels and diverting the water that's running off your property. Perhaps we could consider a similar kind of program where if homeowners are perhaps planting more trees or maintaining their property, maintaining the urban forest on their property, they can go online, similar to put in the rain barrels that you have. While I'm maintaining the trees on my property, I'm planting more trees. You have a starting point, you have an improvement point. The stick might be to create bylaws like Cambridge's private tree bylaw, where homeowners have to confirm ownership of a tree a healthy tree, before any work is done. In Toronto, they make things even more difficult. You have to get permits if you're going to remove trees from your property. I had a cousin who put in a pool, and he had to replace the trees that he removed for the pool with native species. So I believe that at the municipal level, climate change is dependent on a partnership between the city and its homeowners. We know that more trees will benefit us in tangible and intangible ways. Let's provide incentives for more of them and disincentives for their removal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Claver. There are a couple questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you for coming in. I agree with you totally on the urban forestry, and I think in a few months' time we're going to have some solutions that are kind of the way that you're looking at. So I anticipate and I look forward to those, and stay tuned. And one other thing, how did you manage to get such a close shot to of the hawk?
Persistence. Like any photographer who might be in the room, you notice things, and you. $600 lenses, but that's a drop in the bucket. That's a drop in the bucket. If a lot of the bike people are here too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one more. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Clayton, for coming in tonight. It's a pleasure to hear from you. For those of you that don't know, the Lakeside Working Group is doing amazing things in Lakeside Park to protect the lake. There's many rain gardens that people have put in the neighborhood there. If you're looking for more amazing bird photos, you can look at the Lakeside Facebook page, where Clayton and other people are really contributing to that. I really appreciate your comments about protecting trees. Forest Hill, Maple Hill, Westmount are all areas of Kitchener where our urban forest is really, really important. So I really thank you for bringing that up. It's something that I have spoken about a couple of times as well, is when private property owners are doing a good job maintaining and looking after the trees that they've been entrusted with, and truly I feel that that is what we're doing. We're entrusted with those trees on our property, that perhaps there's a way of looking at some credits to those people, maybe similar to the stormwater credits for looking after that. So thank you very much for bringing that up, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Claver. Thank you. And the final registered delegation is Barbara Robinson.
Good evening, Chair Davey, Mayor Urbanovic, members of the Council. I'm here in my capacity as a proud resident of Ward 8, Kitchener. The first thing I'd like to ask Council is about inflow and infiltration. And I apologize I didn't bring slides because I didn't realize until the weekend that I could bring a delegation tonight. So inflow and infiltration is clean water that gets into sewer systems that should not be there. We do expect a little bit of clean water to get into sewer systems, but not lots of clean water. The reason, so it's clean water, but we call it I&I in the industry. The reason this is important is that 1 liter per second of I&I, which is a garden hose, costs $80,000 a year to treat at the Kitchener, in the region of Waterloo. They charge $2.75 per meter cubed. So 1 liter a second costs $80,000 a year. Now, in my work, that happens to be my technical specialty is I&I, and in my work, I see, hundreds and thousands of liters per second of I&I getting into sewer systems. Some of it's been there for a long time and is very difficult to get out, but we're seeing I&I get into new sewer systems as well that shouldn't be there. We're seeing I&I across Canada that's way higher than the allowable values for new sewer systems. The vast majority, 98% of new systems that we have data for are actually leaking. So it doesn't just cost the $80,000 for this year. When you put in a new sewer and it's leaking, it costs $80,000 every year for the next 75 years of the life of the sewer. So, residents might not be aware, and you might not be aware, that how we pay for that I&I is on your user rates for sewer. The residents just pay for that I&I. So I would just like to ask council, and obviously this isn't going to be something that's going to be done for next week, but I'd like the City of Kitchener to start looking at I&I. It's an important, it's very important also because of climate change. So I mentioned the costs, but the other problem about I&I, because it's getting into both sanitary sewers and storm sewers, flooding isn't just coming, it's here, and any day it can hit us. So I&I in storm sewers is using up the capacity in the storm sewer that could otherwise be used to convey the storm that the sewer was designed for. And again, I remind you, this I&I is not, it's water that should not be there. So it's either rainwater or groundwater getting into sewers. For example, when they construct new sewers and don't do the joints properly, groundwater will get in. So it's very important, and it's something that I'd like the City of Kitchener to look at. And I also think we should be reporting every year. City of Waterloo reports their I&I every year, so residents know what it is. So they reported last year they were spending $15 million a year on I&I. And if I compare their flows to our flows, we're probably spending about $30 million a year. I was unable to get those numbers from staff, but that's a lot of scratch. Could we reduce that by 10% and save that $80,000 times whatever number per year? Remember, it's $80,000 for 1 liter a second. So it's very important, and I'd like the city to start looking at that. And the second thing is just about the budget in general and affordability. And you know what? I completely forgot. I meant to say, thank you, City of Kitchener, councillor, staff, for all the great things we're doing. This is, like, even tonight, the delegations, this is a great place to live. There's so many great initiatives going on, and I'm a really proud citizen of Kitchener. However, I'm still going to bug you about I&I, because that's what I do. So the second thing is rather big picture. So just budget and affordability. Of course, as you know, people are struggling with affordability, and of course, I know the tax rate is just below inflation, but user fees have been well above inflation for quite some time. Now, I personally cheerfully pay user fees, tax, whatever you want to charge me for infrastructure, I'll pay. But I'm not living on the street, or, there are people freezing out there tonight who a few extra bucks would make a big difference. So, for example, just big picture, the city spends $111 million every year on staff. Is that the right number? And how do we know that's the right number? Could we find 1%, 2%? 5%? Could we find efficiencies? Could we do things smarter? I don't know. That's not for me to say. I'm just saying, if we could find 5%, maybe people retire and we can find ways to do their job more efficiently. I don't know. 5% would mean a lot to residents who are on that line. So, I would just challenge you to look at the budget more not line by line, because that's easy, but, big picture. Are we spending the right amount? I don't know, and I don't know if we're asking that question, but I think we should. And yeah, so I covered all that. So I think it's important not to just look at the budget as a line-by-line thing, but, big picture, and how are we doing compared to other municipalities of a similar size with similar responsibilities. There are lots of metrics out there that we can use to compare. If I brought slides, I would have shown you some, but, how are we doing in the grand scheme of things? And if we're doing better than everybody else, great. If we're not doing as well, let's go talk to those guys and find out what they're doing and maybe learn some things. And then the last thing that's kind of related to the first two is I see the city has gotten better with transparency in the budget process in the last couple of years, and I really appreciate that. It's very difficult to follow the budget process, and of all people in the city, I should be able to follow it fairly readily with my background and whatever. I find it challenging to get the information I need. For example, I sent some comments in on I&I, but I didn't go back and look at the comments and whether staff had responded, because that's a lot of work. I think it should be a public process. So I would encourage the city to look at next year, maybe we should be having this meeting in December when meaningful input could be provided, because obviously anything I say today, you can't deal with that for next week because it's too complicated or whatever. So I don't think a week really, it's public input, but really, you might move one or two $20,000 items, but you're not going to change the whole focus of the budget. So you have made strides, and I thank you for that. It's still an unwieldy thing to follow, and I think residents would appreciate something a little simpler. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for your comments. If the city were to find additional funds through the budget process, what would you like to see it spent on to make that affordability?
I was thinking to reduce I was thinking to reduce cost to residents. So because affordability, you hear at the doors all the time, people are really struggling. Half of Canadians or households are one paycheck away from financial, or whatever you call it, not insolvency, but people are really on the edge. So I mean, I don't know. That's for council to decide. What I'm saying is, let's not waste money on things like I&I, particularly I&I in new subdivisions where it's very easy to prevent that. That's simple. Denise knows lots about I&I, so Denise can help you with all this. But let's be efficient in the money we're spending. And if we have to spend more for user fees, we have to. But can we save, again, could we save 10% of that I&I by doing, I don't know, an I&I study, FLOMI, whatever. You guys will figure that out. But based on my experience, there's opportunity here for a reduction in I&I, and it would save residents a lot of user fees, and people need that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions. I would just comment on a couple quick things. One issue is the timing that you touched upon. It's a good point. We're a little bit later in the process this year because the most recent election, right? But generally speaking, there isn't a huge gap because the point of the public input session for this evening is to inform a budget that was largely put together in the previous year. So if you were looking for major changes, that's something that we would look for the 2020 budget, is look for that sort of citizen engagement throughout there. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was it's a constant struggle, I think, for all of us when you ask about the right amount of money to spend. And I think if you asked, you get 11 different opinions on the right amount of money to spend from members of council, and it's really our ability to come together and find that representative middle ground and move forward as a corporation. But it is something that we do constantly ask throughout this process, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you kindly. There's no other registered delegations. I'm just going to look up and see if there's anyone that had intended to speak that has not. If you just want to raise your hand. Anyone? No, I'm not seeing anyone. So that concludes the evening. If I could just say quickly, this is the 8th time that I've chaired one of these public input sessions, and this is far and away the most constructive and positive amount of information that I've ever seen. So it's really actually quite inspiring. Many of you came with some good suggestions on how we can do things better, and many of you came to hear in support of things that are already in our budget. So I would like to thank you again, all of you, for coming in, and safe travels home, okay? Thank you.